Let you move. Hands where I can see them right now.
They're up. Both hands up. I live here, officer.
I don't care what you say. You were reported suspicious. Step away from that vehicle.
That's my vehicle. That's my house. I just pulled into my driveway.
Last warning. Step away or I will remove you myself.
You need to calm down. You're making a serious
Get on the ground.
Officer Dennis Holt had been on the force for 6 years. 6 years of Peachtree City patrol routes, domestic calls, fender benders on I-285, and the particular brand of suburban Georgia tension that nobody in the department liked to talk about out loud. 6 years of learning, sometimes consciously and sometimes not, which neighborhoods required paperwork and which ones required presence. Stratford Lane was the kind of street that required presence. He had taken the call at 4:47 p.m. Suspicious male. Black SUV, parked outside 318 Stratford Lane. Caller stated the individual, and this was the exact language logged by dispatch, didn't look like he lived there. That was it. No threat, no crime, no description of any action taken or harm caused. Just a man, parked, outside a house, not looking like he lived there. Officer Holt pulled up 2 minutes later. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb had driven 11 hours straight. Fort Benning to Atlanta. No stops except once outside Macon for gas and a bottle of water he didn't finish. He had the windows down for most of the drive because the air conditioning in the SUV had been acting up since before deployment and he hadn't had time to get it fixed. Hadn't had time to get anything fixed, because 14 months away does not leave things the way you left them. The neighborhood looked the same, though. That was the thing about Stratford Lane. It absorbed time without showing it. Same oak trees leaning over the sidewalk. Same cracked section of curb outside the Delgado house on the corner. Same faded yellow fire hydrant 2 doors down from his own front steps. And he had memorized every detail of this street the way soldiers memorize terrain. Not intentionally, but because home is the landscape your mind returns to when everything else gets loud. He parked against the curb at 4:44 p.m. He sat in the driver's seat for exactly 1 minute before getting out. Not because he was tired, though he was, but because there is a particular kind of stillness that a man allows himself when he has finally, actually, made it back. When the distance between where he was and where he is has finally collapsed to zero. He got out, reached back for his olive green kit bag, set it on the hood while he locked the car. 3 seconds, 4 at most. He never made it to the front door. Across the street, a curtain had moved 11 minutes before he arrived. A call had been made. A description had been given to a dispatcher who logged it without question. Suspicious male, doesn't look like he belongs. No crime, no threat, no cause. Just a man who had spent 14 months in places Officer Dennis Holt would never go. Standing in front of a house that had his name on the deed. The cruiser turned onto Stratford Lane at 4:46 p.m. Marcus Webb saw the lights before he heard the engine. He had been home for less than 60 seconds, and the man stepping out of that cruiser had already made up his mind. Holt didn't walk to the SUV. He moved toward it the way officers move when they have already written the ending before the conversation starts. Shoulders forward, one hand loose at his belt, chin level, or covering the distance between his cruiser and the black SUV like a man collecting something that already belonged to him. Marcus Webb stood at the hood and watched him come. He did not step back. He did not raise his hands unprompted. He did not perform the choreography of innocence that the situation seemed to be demanding from him. He stood with his feet planted on the concrete of his own driveway and watched Officer Dennis Holt close the distance with the patience of a man who had stood his ground in places where standing your ground actually cost something. The first words out of Holt's mouth were not a greeting. They were not a question. They were an instruction. "I need you to step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus Webb looked at him for a moment. Then he said, evenly and without raising his voice, that this was his vehicle and his home, and he had just arrived. He said it the way you state a fact. Not to argue, but because facts are sometimes the only thing standing between a man and a very bad outcome. Holt told him that a call had been made, and he needed to comply. Marcus asked what he was being accused of. Holt said he was asking the questions. That exchange, 17 seconds from first word to first escalation, was captured on the body cam clipped to Holt's chest. It was also captured on the phone of a woman named Claire Donovan, who was standing at her living room window across the street with a clear line of sight to the driveway, and the presence of mind to hit record before Holt had even finished parking. She had lived on Stratford Lane for 9 years. She had never called the police on a neighbor. She recognized Marcus Webb immediately. By the time officers Reyes and Stafford pulled up as backup 4 minutes later, neither of whom had been dispatched, both of whom had self-reported to the scene, Holt had already instructed Marcus to step away from the vehicle 3 times. Marcus had not moved. Not because he was being difficult, but because he was standing on his own property and he knew exactly what moving would mean. Reyes and Stafford flanked Holt without asking a single independent question. Nobody ran the plates, nobody looked at the bag. 3 officers, 1 unarmed man, his own driveway, his name on the deed. And not one of the 3 men in uniform had yet done the single thing that would have ended all of this in under 45 seconds. It was Stafford who put the cuffs on. Not because Holt ordered it, not because Marcus Webb had made a single threatening movement or uttered a single threatening word, but because 3 officers standing in a driveway with no legal ground beneath them needed the confrontation to move in a direction that looked like procedure. Cuffs were procedure, cuffs were control. Cuffs were the institutional language for, we are in charge of what happens next. Marcus Webb put his hands behind his back without being asked twice. He had been in enough high-pressure situations to know that the moment you make a scene, the only thing anyone remembers is the scene. So he complied. He stood straight. He did not curse, did not pull away, did not give Officer Stafford a single frame of footage that could be used to justify what was already happening without justification. He was walked past his own front door, past the mailbox with his name on it, past the olive-green kit bag still sitting on the hood of his SUV, undisturbed, unexamined, carrying everything it carried, and placed in the back seat of Holt's cruiser like a man with something to answer for. He had been home for less than 4 minutes. Through the cruiser window, he watched Reyes open the SUV without a warrant and begin moving through the interior. He watched Stafford lift the kit bag from the hood. He watched Stafford unzip it. He watched him reach inside, remove something, and hold it up toward Holt without a word. Holt looked at it. Then Holt went very quiet. Not the quiet of a man reconsidering. Not yet. But the quiet of a man who has just encountered information he was not prepared for and has not yet decided what to do with it. And his jaw set. He looked at Stafford. He looked back at the item in Stafford's hand. He said something to Reyes that the body cam did not pick up clearly. Reyes stepped away and got on his radio. Inside the cruiser, Marcus Webb watched all of it through the window. He said nothing. His expression did not change. He had the look of a man who had already calculated exactly how this was going to end. Not with fear, but with the cold arithmetic of someone who knew precisely what was in that bag and precisely what it meant. They drove him to the precinct at 5:14 p.m. He was fingerprinted, photographed. Walked to a holding room on the 2nd floor where a fluorescent light buzzed at a frequency that had probably been annoying people since 2009. He sat down, straightened his back, and waited. He had waited in worse rooms, in worse countries. For worse reasons, inside that kit bag was something that would not just end the arrest, it would end careers. But first, someone in that building had to be willing to read what was in it. Desk Sergeant Patricia Voss had been processing arrests for 11 years. She had seen everything that a mid-sized Atlanta precinct could produce: domestic incidents, DUIs, aggravated disputes, white-collar holds, the occasional case that made the evening news and the far more frequent cases that didn't. She had developed the particular emotional economy of someone who processes human beings at their worst moments for long enough that very little surprises her anymore. Marcus Webb surprised her. Not because of how he looked, not because of anything he said. He had barely spoken since being brought in. But because of what came back when she ran his name through the federal database at 5:41 p.m. after the local system returned nothing. No priors, no warrants, no flags of any kind. Clean in a way that made the arrest sitting on her desk feel heavier than it had 60 seconds ago. She logged into the secondary system. It required a separate federal clearance code. She typed it in, hit enter. Watched the loading bar move across the screen with the indifferent pace of government software that has never once been in a hurry. Then it loaded. And Patricia Voss, 11 years into a career that had taught her to feel very little, sat back in her chair. She read it twice. Marcus Darnell Webb, age 32, Atlanta, Georgia, United States Army, Staff Sergeant, 9 years active service. Deployment 1, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, 2017. Deployment 2, Mosul, Iraq, 2019, honorably discharged, 13 months prior. Commendation, Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device, awarded for actions under direct enemy fire during the Mosul Offensive, November 2019. She set the printout down on her desk. Then she looked at the property of the items Stafford had logged from the kit bag, itemized during the vehicle search, entered into evidence at 5:22 p.m. 1 set of redeployment orders, 1 honorable discharge certificate, 1 folded American flag in a triangular display case, the kind presented to families at military funerals, kept now by the soldier who came home when not everyone did. Patricia Voss picked up her phone and called the watch commander. She did not raise her voice. She did not editorialize. She read him exactly what was on the screen in front of her, item by item. The way you read something when the facts are damning enough on their own that commentary would only slow them down. Officer Dennis Holt had arrested a decorated combat veteran at gunpoint in front of his own home on the basis of a neighbor's call that described no crime, cited no threat, and amounted to 4 words that had no business generating a federal record. Doesn't look like he belongs. The watch commander told her to open the holding room. That right there. That moment when the system finally saw who it had been holding, that is the moment this video exists for. If this story made you feel something, subscribe right now. We follow these cases until every consequence lands. And I want to know, drop it in the comments. 1 word. 1 word that describes what Officer Dennis Holt deserves after what you just heard. The holding room door opened at 5:58 p.m. Marcus Webb stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked out without saying a single word to anyone in that building. He didn't need to. What was coming would say everything. Claire Donovan had sent the footage to 2 people. The first was her cousin, a producer at Atlanta's WSB-TV, who had been covering police accountability stories for 6 years and recognized immediately, within 40 seconds of watching the clip on her phone at 6:15 p.m., that what she was looking at was not a local story, it was a national one. The second person Claire sent it to was a veterans advocacy attorney named Raymond Chester, and whose office was 12 minutes from Stratford Lane, and who had built his entire practice around exactly the kind of case that had just walked into his professional orbit without him having to look for it. Chester watched the footage once. He called his paralegal before it finished playing. By 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning, less than 16 hours after Marcus Webb had been walked past his own mailbox in handcuffs, Raymond Chester had filed a federal civil rights complaint under Title 42, Section 1983, citing unlawful detention, illegal search and seizure, and excessive use of force. He named Officer Dennis Holt as the primary respondent. He named Officers Reyes and Stafford as secondary respondents. He named the Atlanta Police Department as the institutional respondent. He held a press conference on the steps of his office at noon. He brought the printout of Marcus Webb's military record. He read the Army Commendation Medal citation out loud, slowly, into every microphone present. WSB-TV ran the Claire Donovan footage at the 6 p.m. broadcast. By 8 p.m. it had been picked up by 4 national outlets. By 10 p.m. the clip had been viewed 11 million times across platforms. By Thursday morning, Officer Dennis Holt's name had been searched 2.3 million times on Google, a number that his department's communications office was almost certainly aware of before he was. The Atlanta Police Department released a statement at 7:43 p.m. Wednesday. It was 4 paragraphs long. It used the phrase, "We take all allegations seriously," twice. It confirmed that an internal affairs investigation had been opened. It did not use the words apology, misconduct, or veteran anywhere in its 4 paragraphs. Officer Dennis Holt was placed on administrative leave Thursday morning, not voluntarily by direct order of the deputy chief. Officers Reyes and Stafford were placed on administrative reassignment pending the outcome of the internal investigation. The department announced a policy review of its response protocols for suspicious person calls. It was the third such announcement the department had made in 5 years. Neither of the previous two had produced a single documented policy change. Marcus Webb had not made a public statement. His attorney had spoken, the department had spoken, the news had spoken. 11 million people had watched the footage, but Marcus Webb himself had said nothing. He had one thing left to say. He said it from his front porch, and it was 7 words long. Marcus Webb gave his statement on a Friday morning. No press conference, no podium, no prepared remarks handed to journalists in advance. He walked out of his front door at 318 Stratford Lane, stood on the top step of his porch, and looked at the small gathering of cameras and microphones that had assembled on the sidewalk in front of the house he owned, on the street where he had been treated like a trespasser 4 days earlier. He did not have notes. He looked directly into the nearest camera, and he said 7 words. I just wanted to come home. Then he went back inside and closed the door. Those 7 words did what 4 paragraphs of departmental statement could not. They did what 11 million views and a federal civil rights complaint and a deputy chief's administrative order had not quite managed to do. They made the entire weight of the story, the deployment, the driveway, the handcuffs, the holding room, the fluorescent buzz, the flag folded in its triangular case, sitting in an evidence bag, they made all of it collapse into a single, clean, unbearable point. He had not asked for recognition. He had not asked for a parade or a thank you or a formal acknowledgement of his 9 years and 2 deployments and the Army Commendation Medal with Valor that the United States government had decided his actions deserved. He had asked for the same thing that every person on every ordinary street in every city in this country is supposed to be able to ask for without it becoming a federal case, and he had asked to park in front of his own house. As of this recording, the civil rights lawsuit filed by attorney Raymond Chester is active in the Northern District of Georgia Federal Court. Officer Dennis Holt remains on administrative leave. Officers Reyes and Stafford remain on reassignment. The department's internal affairs investigation is ongoing. The 4th policy review in 5 years has been announced and has not yet produced documentation. Marcus Webb still lives at 318 Stratford Lane. He mows his own lawn. He parks in his own driveway. He comes home, when he comes home, to the country that handed him a medal for actions taken under direct enemy fire, and then sent a patrol car to question whether he belonged there. He should not have had to prove he belonged. He already did. If this story made you angry, good. That anger means something. Share this video. Put it in front of someone who needs to see it, because stories like Marcus Webb's disappear when we stop talking about them. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What should actually happen to Officer Dennis Holt? And what does it take? What does it actually take for this country to stop making its veterans prove they belong in their own driveways? Subscribe to this channel. We do not drop these stories. We follow them until the system responds, or until we have documented exactly why it didn't. The black SUV was parked legally against the curb. Engine off. No hazard lights. No violation of any observable traffic or municipal code. The driver had already stepped out, a tall black man, solidly built, moving with the unhurried stillness of someone who had nowhere else to be because he was already exactly where he was supposed to be. There was a bag on the hood of the SUV, worn, olive green, the kind of bag that has been packed and unpacked too many times to count. Holt glanced at it for less than a second and looked away. He would spend a long time thinking about that later. What Holt saw instead was size, stillness, a man who did not shrink when the cruiser rolled up, a man who watched him approach without moving his feet, and in Officer Dennis Holt's 6 years of experience, a man who didn't move his feet when a patrol car arrived was a man with something to prove. He was right about that part. He was wrong about everything else. Before we go further, have you or someone you know ever been stopped for simply existing somewhere you had every right to be? Drop your story in the comments, and if you believe these cases deserve to be followed all the way to the end, subscribe right now. Because what happened next on Stratford Lane did not stay on Stratford Lane.